The day she showed up at my job site, I was covered in dust, paint on both hands, thinking about nothing more than replacing a warped window frame before the rain came in. I had no idea that within 24 hours, my entire life would turn upside down because of one sentence spoken by a woman I had never met. My name is Jack Dalton. I'm 32 years old, and for the last 5 years, I've been running a small restoration company in Charleston, South Carolina. It's not glamorous work. Mostly old homes, historic storefronts, broken trim, water damage, rotted porches, crooked doors, and people with expensive taste who somehow still look surprised when old wood costs money to save. I liked it that way. Predictable jobs, clear problems, honest work. At 8 in the morning, wood either needed replacing or it didn't. Windows either shut properly or they didn't. Nothing about my life was elegant, but at least it was understandable. Which is why the woman stepping out of a black town car in 4-inch heels and a cream coat did not feel like the beginning of anything good. I was on a ladder outside the old Harbor House Annex, halfway through removing a damaged sash window when the car pulled up at the curb. I barely looked at first. Rich people were always drifting in and out of that block, usually on their way to one of the Langford properties. Then the driver opened the rear door and she stepped out. Tall, dark hair pinned back, no wasted movement. The kind of woman who looked expensive even standing still. Not flashy, worse, precise. The kind of precise that made you think she had never once sent a text with a typo in her life. She looked up at the building, then at me. Then she walked straight through a pile of drop cloths and construction dust like the world had already agreed to get out of her way. I climbed down the ladder because, 1, I'm not rude, and 2, women like that don't cross active job sites unless they've come to ruin somebody's morning personally. "Can I help you?" I asked. She took in the gloves, the tool belt, the paint on my shirt, all of it, and said, "Are you Jack Dalton?" That wasn't what I expected. "Yeah." "Good." She held out a hand. "My name is Caroline Langford." Of course it was. If you live in Charleston long enough, you know the name. The Langfords owned half the polished old money elegance tourists came to photograph. Boutique hotels, event spaces, 2 historic inns, 1 private club people pretended not to care about getting into. Money with a pedigree? The kind of family business that had its own myths. I looked at her hand, then shook it. "Okay." Caroline didn't smile. "I need a husband by tomorrow." I stared at her. There are moments when your brain doesn't fail exactly, it just refuses to cooperate on moral grounds. "I'm sorry," I said. "What?" "I need to be legally married by 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon." I looked past her, half expecting cameras, hidden friends, or one of those prank channels that pay people to destroy a stranger's faith in humanity. Nothing. Just the black car, the driver pretending not to listen, and Caroline Langford standing in the morning light like she had just asked where I kept the extra nails. I folded my arms. "You came to the wrong job site." She didn't move. That was the first unsettling thing about her. No embarrassment, no stumble, no effort to make the request sound less insane than it was. "I don't think I did," she said. I laughed once, mostly because it was either that or walk away. "Lady, I restore buildings. I don't solve whatever this is." "I know exactly what you do." That caught my attention. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin leather folder. "Not papers for me to sign, research, on me." "Your business is debt-free," she said. "You've turned down 3 acquisition offers in the last 2 years, including one from my cousin. You own your company outright. You have no board, no investors, no family obligations anyone can use against you, and according to public record, you've never been sued, arrested, or divorced." I stared at her. She had done homework, a lot of it. "My grandfather's will," she continued, "contains a control clause tied to marital status. If I am not married by tomorrow's board meeting, temporary voting control of Langford heritage passes to my cousin, Daniel." Her mouth tightened on his. "Name. If that happens, he'll sell the flagship properties within the year." I should say this clearly. I did not like being drafted into rich people succession warfare before lunch. But I also knew enough about the Langford flagship properties to understand what sale meant. Not just money changing hands. A 100-year-old hotel turned into luxury condos, historic rooms gutted, staff replaced, legacy flattened into return on investment. Still, none of that explained me. Why not marry a lawyer? I asked. Or a banker? Or some polished guy from your world who already owns cufflinks with family crests? Because Daniel can buy those men. Her eyes held mine. He already tried to buy you. That stopped me. 3 months ago, a smug man in a navy suit had offered me a number with too many zeros to sell my workshop property and take a long-term restoration contract under Langford Heritage Expansion. I said no because the math smelled rotten, and because men like that always expect working people to confuse money with respect. You refused him, Caroline said. That's why I'm here. The whole street seemed to go quieter around us. I need someone independent, she said. Someone my cousin can't pressure, flatter, or own. Someone who doesn't need my money, isn't impressed by my name, and understands the difference between preserving something valuable and gutting it for convenience. I looked at the old window frame beside me, then back at her. She'd chosen well. That was the problem. Because now this didn't feel like a crazy woman making a crazy request. It felt like a smart woman making a desperate one. And before I could decide whether that made it better or worse, she said the one thing that actually made my pulse shift. I'm not asking you to love me, Mr. Dalton. I'm asking whether you're the kind of man who can help me hold a door shut while the wolves are already in the house. I should have said no. A sane man would have. A sane man would have laughed, told Caroline Langford to hire an actor, a lawyer, or one of those men who already looked like they belonged beside inherited money, then gone back to his ladder. Instead, I asked, what exactly happens if your cousin gets control? Caroline answered immediately, like she had been carrying the words in her throat for days. He sells the Blackwell Hotel first, she said, then the Waterfront Inn, then whatever else gives him the fastest return. Her jaw tightened. My grandfather built Langford Heritage to preserve historic properties. Daniel wants to strip them for parts. That hit me where she meant it to, because I knew the Blackwell. Everybody in Charleston did. It wasn't just another hotel. It was the kind of building people pointed at when they said the city still had a soul. Still, I wasn't stupid enough to let sentiment skip the hard questions. And your grandfather made marriage the condition? He made stability the condition, she said. Marriage was his crude version of it. That sounds like a man with money and terrible ideas. That is a precise description of my grandfather. Despite myself, I smiled. Caroline noticed. Good, you can still do that. That was not agreement. No, she said, but it wasn't refusal either. She was too sharp for me, and I was already starting to dislike how much I respected that. I set my gloves down on the sawhorse and said, let me guess. You've already gone through everyone else. She held my gaze. Everyone suitable in my world is either tied to Daniel, afraid of him, or too interested in what they could get out of being my husband. And I'm not? You told his offer to go to hell. I used different words. I assumed. That got me again, a little too easily. I looked at the folder still in her hand. How much of my life is in there? Enough to know you pay your crew well, your books are clean, and you sent your mother to Arizona last winter because she'd never seen the desert. A beat? Not enough to know whether you're brave or just stubborn. That's invasive. That's survival. Fair. A truck rattled past on the street. Somewhere inside the annex, one of my guys dropped something heavy and swore. The day kept moving, which felt rude considering mine had just split in half. What would this even look like? I asked. Caroline exhaled, and for the first time she looked tired instead of just controlled. A civil ceremony by noon, she said. The board meets at 5. My attorney files the license immediately. We attend together. You say very little. I survive the vote. After that, we agree on terms and duration like adults. Duration? Yes. So, this is a timed marriage. This is a strategic one. That sounds worse. It probably is. I studied her for a long second. There was no softness in her posture, but there was strain around the edges now. She had likely not slept. Probably not eaten. Probably spent the last week being told by men in suits that there were elegant solutions while none of them offered one that didn't cost her everything. And still there she was, on my job site, in expensive shoes, asking anyway. What do I get? I asked. That made her straighten a fraction, like she had expected that question and approved of it. Anything reasonable, she said. A financial arrangement, legal protections, full discretion. I am not asking for charity. I shook my head. I'm not asking for money. Then what are you asking for? The answer surprised both of us. The truth. Caroline went still. All of it, I said. If I do this, I'm not walking blind into your family war. I want Daniel, the board, the clause, the press risk, and every ugly detail your lawyers are probably trying to soften. For the first time since she stepped out of the car, she looked less like a woman making a pitch and more like one deciding whether she could trust the man in front of her. Then she said quietly, "Okay." That one word did more to move me than all the money in Charleston could have. I nodded once. And one more thing. What? If I say yes, you come to my world too. Her brow lifted. Meaning? Meaning you don't get a polished stranger in a suit you can arrange into your life like furniture. You get me, my workshop, my crew, my rules. If your cousin sends anyone here, I want you to see exactly what you're asking me to put at risk. A very small smile touched her mouth. Mr. Dalton, she said, I came here hoping you were difficult. That sounds unhealthy. That sounds like I chose correctly. I looked at her, at the car, at the folder, at the old window frame waiting behind me. Then I asked the question that mattered more than all the others. Why do you care this much? Not about the company, not about the will, about the buildings. Caroline's face changed, not dramatically, just enough for the truth to show through. Because my mother grew up in those hallways, she said. Because my grandfather was cruel in private and visionary in public, and the buildings are the only part of him I'm still willing to defend. Her voice lowered. Because if Daniel gets them, he will turn every room I loved into a spreadsheet. That did it. I believed her. Not because she was rich, because that sentence wasn't. It was personal in the way only true things are. I looked at the warped window frame in my hands, then back at her. And before common sense could get organized enough to stop me, I heard myself say, All right. Caroline blinked. All right, I'll do it. The relief that crossed her face was so quick and so unguarded that it almost made her look younger. Then it vanished, replaced by composure. We need to leave in 20 minutes, she said. I laughed. There you are. She almost smiled again. Then, as if she couldn't help herself, she looked around my dusty job site and said, Should I be concerned that I'm marrying a man covered in paint? You should be concerned about a lot of things. Her eyes met mine. And for the first time since this began, there was something in them that wasn't strategy. Jack, she said softly, I already am. 20 minutes later, I was in the back of Caroline Langford's town car wearing the cleanest shirt I owned from the emergency duffel in my truck, my hair still damp from the sink in the job site bathroom, and my life making less sense by the second. Caroline sat beside me with a tablet open on her lap, explaining legal terms like she was briefing me before a hostile takeover, which apparently she was. There will be a prenup, she said. Already drafted. You'll have independent counsel review it before we sign anything final. Very romantic. This is not romantic. I noticed when you said independent counsel. She looked at me. Would you prefer me to be careless? No. Then don't complain when I protect you properly. That shut me up, because that was the first time she said it that way. Protect you, not protect herself, not protect the company. Me. We stopped at my workshop first because I refused to walk into whatever world she belonged to without at least telling my foreman I might be unreachable for the day. My crew took it well, by which I mean they all stopped working. My foreman, Luis, looked from Caroline to me, then at the town car, then back at Caroline. Boss, he said slowly, are we being sued? Worse, I said. I'm getting married. A hammer fell somewhere behind him. Caroline stood perfectly still beside me. Luis stared at me for a full 5 seconds, then pointed at her. To her? That appears to be the current plan. He looked at Caroline. You in trouble? She blinked, clearly not used to being asked that by a man in paint-stained work pants holding a measuring tape. Then she answered honestly. Yes. Luis nodded once like that was enough. Then he'll help. Something flickered across Caroline's face. Surprise, maybe. Or the beginning of understanding that my world didn't run on contracts first. Sometimes it ran on character. The civil ceremony happened at 11:40 in a courthouse room that smelled like paper, old wood, and someone's over-microwaved lunch. Her attorney was there. So was mine, because Caroline had somehow arranged a lawyer I'd used once for a zoning dispute to appear like he'd been summoned by magic and billable urgency. We signed papers, answered questions, stood side by side while a judge with kind eyes and absolutely no patience for drama said, "Do you both understand the legal nature of this union?" Caroline said, "Yes." I said, "Apparently." The judge looked over her glasses. "Mr. Dalton?" "Yes, ma'am, I understand." When it came time to exchange rings, Caroline went still. "I didn't think," she began. I reached into my pocket. She looked down as I placed a plain silver band on the table. Her eyes lifted to mine. "My father's," I said quietly. "He left it to me. We can use it for the ceremony and take it off later." For the first time all day, Caroline Langford looked truly unprepared. "You brought your father's wedding ring?" "I didn't have time to shop." "That's not what I meant." "I know." The judge waited. Caroline took the ring with a kind of care that made something in my chest tighten. When she slid it onto my finger, her hand trembled once. Just once. But I felt it. Then I gave her a simple band her attorney had brought in a velvet box, and when my fingers brushed hers, she didn't pull away. By noon, I was married to a woman I had met 4 hours earlier. By 4:30, I was walking into Langford Heritage headquarters with her at my side. The boardroom sat on the top floor of a restored brick building overlooking the harbor. Everything in it was polished: table, windows, people, lies. Daniel Langford was already there. I recognized him immediately. Same navy suit, same smile with no warmth behind it. Same man who had offered to buy my workshop like I was an inconvenience with a price tag. His eyes landed on me, then on Caroline's ring. For half a second, his face changed. That alone was worth the suit I had borrowed from my lawyer's assistant, even if the sleeves were wrong. "Caroline," Daniel said smoothly, "this is unexpected." She smiled like a blade. "That's a shame. I hate disappointing you." I liked her more than I should have for that. The board chair, a silver-haired woman named Margaret Ellison, called the meeting to order. Caroline presented the marriage license, the filing confirmation, and the trust documents. Her attorney spoke. Daniel's attorney objected. Margaret read quietly. The room held its breath. Then Daniel leaned back and said, "With respect, this is absurd. She married a contractor this morning." Every face turned toward me. Caroline's hand tightened under the table, not because she was afraid, because she was furious. I looked at Daniel and said, "Restoration contractor." A board member coughed to hide a laugh. Daniel's smile thinned. "You expect us to believe this is a real marriage?" "No," Caroline said before I could answer. "I expect you to follow the trust." Daniel's eyes stayed on me. "And what exactly did she promise you?" That was the question everyone was too polite to ask. I sat forward slightly. "Nothing that would interest you," I said. His mouth curved. "I find that hard to believe. That's because you think everyone is for sale just because you are." The boardroom went silent. Caroline turned her head toward me very slowly. I had probably just made everything worse. But Daniel had insulted my work, her judgment, and the only honest thing in the room. So, no, I didn't regret it. Margaret Ellison looked down at the documents again, then back at Caroline. "The clause is satisfied," she said. "Voting control remains with Ms. Langford." Caroline closed her eyes for 1 second. Just one. But I saw the relief hit her. Daniel stood too fast. "This is not over." Caroline looked up at him. "No, but for today you lost." He left the room without shaking anyone's hand. Very wealthy men hate exits they can't choreograph. After the board cleared out, Caroline and I ended up alone by the windows, the harbor turning gold under the late sun. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You didn't have to defend me." "I wasn't only defending you." "No. I was defending good taste. He's unbearable." That got a real laugh out of her, small, exhausted, beautiful in a way I absolutely did not need to notice right now. Then she looked at my hand, at my father's ring still on my finger. "I'll give that back," she said softly. I glanced down at it, then at her. "Tomorrow." Her eyes lifted. Something passed between us then. Not love, not yet, but not strategy either. And when she whispered, "Jack, what did we just do?" I had the unsettling feeling the board meeting had been the easiest part of the day. Caroline looked at me like she expected me to have an answer. I didn't. Not a useful one. So I said the only thing that was true. "We stopped him. For today." "For today," I agreed. She gave a tired little laugh and looked out at the harbor. "That is not as comforting as you think." "No," I said, "but it's better than losing." That made her quiet. Then her phone buzzed. She read the screen and went still. "What?" "Daniel," she said. "He's already leaking it." She turned the phone toward me. A message from her attorney. "Press inquiry received. Anonymous source claims marriage is fraudulent. Expect photographers at your building tonight." Caroline shut her eyes. For the first time since she walked onto my job site, she looked genuinely trapped. Not defeated. Trapped. "The penthouse has a front desk," she said. "Staff, cameras. If I go there, Daniel will know exactly who comes and goes. He'll turn it into a circus before morning." I looked at the message again, then at her. And suddenly, the absurdity of the whole day sharpened into one clear fact. If this marriage was going to survive long enough to protect anything, it had to look less like paperwork and more like a life. I held out my hand. Caroline frowned. "What?" "Keys," I said. "To what?" "Your place. Send your driver for whatever you need tonight." She stared at me. Then I said the line that finally made her lose her composure completely. "You needed a husband by tomorrow. Fine. Then pack your bags for my place." For 3 full seconds, she said nothing. Then she laughed. Not the polite one. Not the boardroom one. A real laugh. Sudden and exhausted and almost disbelieving. "Mr. Dalton," she said, "you are either very brave or very bad at self-preservation. I've been told both." That was how Caroline Langford ended up in my small house behind the workshop before midnight, standing in my kitchen with 1 suitcase, 2 garment bags, and the expression of a woman realizing that no amount of wealth prepares you for a guest room with 1 stubborn window and a ceiling fan that clicks on medium speed. "This is," she began, small. I was going to say honest. That hit me harder than it should have. The first week was not romantic. It was lawyers, signatures, phone calls, Daniel's threats, board scrutiny, and Caroline learning that my coffee maker sounded like farm equipment. She slept in the guest room. I slept badly. We ate takeout at my kitchen table, while she read legal updates and I pretended not to notice how naturally she started leaving her shoes by the door. But something changed in those ordinary hours. She met my crew and remembered everyone's names. She walked through the Blackwell with me and listened when I explained which walls could be saved and which ones were already too far gone. And I saw her stop being the controlled woman from the town car and become someone fiercely, almost painfully loyal to the things she loved. 2 months later, Daniel made his last major play. He tried to force an emergency board review, claiming our marriage was a sham. Caroline arrived with our attorneys. I arrived with my father's ring still on my hand. When Margaret Ellison asked whether we intended to remain married beyond the required period, Caroline glanced at me. I should have let her answer. Instead, I said, "That depends on whether she keeps stealing my side of the kitchen table." A few board members laughed. Caroline didn't. She looked at me like that silly sentence had touched something no grand speech could have reached. Afterward, in the empty hallway, she said, "You didn't have to make it sound real." I looked at her. "I didn't make it sound anything." Her breath caught. Then she kissed me. Not because of the will. Not because Daniel was watching. Not because we needed anyone to believe it. Because for the first time all day, no one was. 6 months later, the legal requirement expired. Caroline placed a folder on my kitchen table one evening and said, "Annulment terms. Clean, fair, no pressure." I looked at the folder, then at her. She was trying to be generous, trying to give me the exit she thought any decent man deserved. So I slid the folder back across the table. No. Her eyes went bright. "Jack, you asked for the truth on day one," I said. "Here it is. I don't want out." She stood very still. Then she whispered, "Neither do I." A year later, we had a real wedding. Small, no press, no Daniel. Just family, my crew, a few people from Langford Heritage, and the Blackwell Hotel restored enough that the ballroom smelled faintly of fresh wood and old history. This time, when I put my father's ring on, it stayed. Caroline looked at it, then at me, and smiled like she had finally stopped bracing for the house to fall. 3 years later, Langford Heritage was still standing. The Blackwell had reopened. My restoration company had grown, but not so much that I stopped knowing every job by name. Caroline still corrected my grammar in emails, still hated my ceiling fan, and still came downstairs some mornings in one of my old shirts carrying coffee like she had always belonged there. And sometimes, when someone asked how we met, she would say, "I needed a husband by tomorrow." Then she'd look at me and I'd say, "So I told her to pack her bags." What would you have done if a woman you'd never met showed up at your job site and said she needed a husband by tomorrow to save everything her family built? And have you ever seen a crazy decision turn into the most real thing in someone's life? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.